The Windsor Hotel doesn't hire women over 50 to work their upscale restaurant. They prefer younger faces, brighter smiles, staff who don't carry the weight of disappointment in their eyes. But when your resume includes 15 years as a concert pianist and references from some of Manhattan's most influential families, exceptions get made. I'm Irene Cooper. I'm 52 years old, and I've been serving cocktails to people who used to attend my performances for the past 5 years. Most of them pretend not to recognize me. The few who do offer sympathetic smiles that burn worse than invisibility. I've learned to accept both with the same practiced grace I use when presenting the wine list. "Irene, you're on VIP tonight," Diana Foster announced as I arrived for my evening shift. She's the floor manager, sharp, efficient, and one of the few people here who treats me like a person rather than a cautionary tale. "Mr. Wallace is staying in the penthouse suite. He rarely dines downstairs, but when he does, he expects perfection." I nodded, checking my appearance in the staff room mirror one final time. Silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Minimal makeup. The black uniform pressed and spotless. At 52, I've learned that invisibility is its own kind of armor. Hudson Wallace. I'd heard the name, of course. Tech CEO, clean energy innovator, notoriously private. The kind of billionaire who makes headlines for his work rather than his scandals. Young, successful, exactly the type of guest who keeps the Windsor's reputation gleaming. The VIP section remained empty until precisely 8 o'clock when he arrived. Alone, which surprised me. Men like him usually travel with assistants, colleagues, hangers-on. But Hudson Wallace walked in by himself, tall and composed in a perfectly tailored navy suit. "Good evening, sir. May I start you with our cocktail selection?" I maintained the professional detachment that had become second nature over the past 5 years. Polite but not obsequious. Attentive but not intrusive. "Just water, please. Still. And I'll have the chef's tasting menu." His voice was quiet but decisive. As I placed the menu on the table, he reached for it, and his sleeve pulled back slightly. That's when I saw it. A birthmark on his right wrist. Crescent moon-shaped. Small but unmistakable. The water glass I was holding nearly slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. I caught it just in time, but not before the ice rattled audibly against the crystal. "Are you all right?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice rather than the irritation I'd expected. "Yes, sir. I apologize." But my heart was hammering so violently I was certain he could hear it. Because I have the same birthmark, in the exact same place, on my right wrist, and so did the baby boy I delivered 30 years ago. The baby boy who lived for only a few hours before slipping away. The baby boy I buried in Riverside Cemetery, whose grave I visited every month for 15 years until my divorce left me too broken to continue. I forced myself through the service, my hands steady even as my mind raced. Throughout the meal, I found myself stealing glances at him. It wasn't just the birthmark. There was something hauntingly familiar in the line of his jaw, the way he held his fork with such careful precision. He had unusual eyes, gray-blue, almost silver in certain lights, eyes like mine. When he finished his entree, I couldn't stop myself. "Sir, forgive my impertinence, but may I ask your full name?" He looked up, startled, then amused. "You're serving me dinner but don't know who I am?" "Your full name, I mean." My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Hudson Alexander Wallace." The room tilted. Alexander. We had chosen the name Alexander for our son, Alexander Martin Cooper, though he'd never lived long enough to be christened. "Thank you, sir." I turned away before he could see my face, before he could ask why a waitress was suddenly struggling to breathe. In the kitchen, I braced myself against the wall, taking deep, steadying breaths. Diana found me there. "Irene, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Just felt dizzy for a moment." "Do you need to go home?" "No, I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. Because when I returned with his coffee, I noticed how he absently rubbed that birthmark while reading something on his phone. The same unconscious gesture I make when I'm thinking deeply. The same gesture I'd watched my baby make in those brief hours before he died. Or before I was told he died. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my small apartment, a far cry from the Park Avenue penthouse I'd shared with Martin during our marriage, and pulled out the small wooden box I kept in my closet. The box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were the few mementos I'd managed to keep: the hospital bracelet, impossibly tiny, a lock of fine dark hair, the only photograph, grainy and heartbreaking, showing a premature infant with tubes and wires, so small he fit in one hand. And there, visible even in the poor quality of the photo, was the crescent moon birthmark on his right wrist. I opened my laptop with trembling hands and searched. Hudson Alexander Wallace. The results flooded my screen. Articles about his renewable energy company, Phoenix Tech. Photos from industry conferences. A brief Wikipedia entry that mentioned he was raised by Patricia and Robert Wallace, both deceased. Adopted. My heart stopped. Born, April 14th, 1996. My son was born on April 14th, 1996. I dug deeper, my fingers flying across the keyboard with desperate urgency. Patricia Wallace, deceased 2025. Former obstetrician at University Medical Center. University Medical Center, where I'd given birth. Where Dr. Rebecca Hayes had delivered my baby. Where I'd been told he couldn't survive. The coincidences were piling up, each one too specific to dismiss. Same birthday, same birthmark, same middle name, raised by a doctor from the same hospital where my son had supposedly died. I looked at my wrist, at the crescent moon that had marked me since birth, the same mark I'd seen on my baby during those few precious hours, the same mark I'd just seen on Hudson Wallace. By the time dawn broke over the city, I'd made my decision. I needed to know the truth. Even if the truth was that I was losing my mind, seeing connections where none existed, I had to know. I called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. Then I sat in my apartment, watching the clock, waiting for a reasonable hour to return to the hotel. Not as staff this time. At 9 a.m., I called the Windsor's main line. I need to leave a message for Mr. Hudson Wallace in the penthouse suite. Certainly. May I ask who's calling? Irene Cooper. I served Mr. Wallace dinner last night. I have information that may be of interest to him. It's personal. There was a pause. This wasn't standard protocol. But something in my voice must have convinced the operator. I'll pass along your message, ma'am. I waited. 2 hours passed. Then my phone rang from an unknown number. Ms. Cooper, this is Hudson Wallace. Your message was intriguing. Would you be available to meet this morning? His voice was cautious, curious, not quite suspicious. Yes, I would. There's a coffee shop on 5th Avenue, 3 blocks from the hotel. Café Lucerne. Would 11 o'clock work? I'll be there. I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table away from the windows. When Hudson walked in, he spotted me immediately. Out of his suit, wearing dark jeans and a gray sweater, he looked younger, more vulnerable. He sat across from me, those unusual silver blue eyes studying my face with an intensity that made me want to look away. Thank you for meeting me, I said. I know this must seem strange. Your message said you had personal information. I'm curious what a waitress at the Windsor could possibly have to tell me that's personal. There was no hostility in his voice, just honest curiosity. I pushed back my sleeve, exposing the birthmark on my wrist. His eyes widened slightly. You noticed this last night, I said. I saw you rubbing yours the same way I do when I'm thinking. He said nothing, but slowly pushed back his own sleeve. 2 identical crescent moons. Birthmarks run in families, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. This particular shape is relatively rare. Less than 1% of the population has clearly defined shaped birthmarks. Crescents are among the rarest. What exactly are you suggesting, Ms. Cooper? I reached into my bag and pulled out the photograph. 30 years old, creased at the edges, but still clear enough. I placed it on the table between us. He picked it up, his expression shifting from curiosity to confusion. This is a newborn infant in a NICU. My son, born April 14th, 1996, at University Medical Center. Premature, 26 weeks. I touched my wrist. He had this birthmark, identical to ours. Hudson set the photo down carefully. Ms. Cooper, I'm not sure what you're implying, but his name was Alexander. Alexander Martin Cooper. He lived for a few hours, or that's what I was told. I met his gaze directly. You were born on April 14th, 1996. Your middle name is Alexander. You have the same birthmark. You were adopted by Patricia Wallace, who was an obstetrician at University Medical Center. The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications neither of us wanted to voice. This is... He stopped, shook his head. You can't possibly be suggesting what I think you're suggesting. I don't know what I'm suggesting, I admitted. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm a grieving mother seeing connections that don't exist, but the coincidences are too many, too specific. I had to ask. I had to know. Hudson leaned back in his chair, his expression carefully controlled, but I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. I was adopted, he said finally. My parents told me when I was 16, but I've seen my birth certificate. It lists Patricia Wallace as my biological mother. I never questioned it, never felt the need to search for anyone else. Did your mother ever talk about my hospital? About working there? She retired from University Medical when I was young. She never discussed her work much. He paused. She passed away last year. Cancer. I'm sorry. We sat in silence, the coffee shop's ambient noise fading into the background. Ms. Cooper, he said slowly, if what you're suggesting is even remotely possible, it would mean someone lied to me 30 years ago. Someone told me my baby died when he didn't. Someone took him and gave him to another family. My voice broke slightly. It would mean I've spent 30 years grieving a child who was alive. Hudson's face had gone pale. That's not just deception. That's kidnapping. That's fraud. That's criminal, I finished. Yes, it is. He stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair in agitation. Then he turned back to me. DNA test. We need a DNA test. Today. Yes. If, and this is a very big if what you're suggesting is true, we need evidence. We need to know for certain before we... He stopped. Before we what? Accuse people who might be innocent? Destroy memories of people who are already dead? Or find out the truth about what was done to both of us, I said quietly. He studied me for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. I know a private lab. Discreet, fast. We can have results in 72 hours. Thank you. As we stood to leave, he hesitated. Ms. Cooper, Irene, there's something you should know. After you asked my name last night, I found it strange. So I did some research. I found old society photos from 20 years ago. You were a pianist. Quite well known, apparently. I nodded, not trusting my voice. You were married to Martin Cooper, the attorney. Yes. We divorced 5 years ago. He took everything in the settlement. The bitterness in my voice surprised me. Everything except my name. I kept his name because changing all my documents felt like another defeat. Something flickered across Hudson's face. Martin Cooper of Cooper and Sterling? You know him? His firm has been trying to secure my business for months. I have a meeting scheduled with him next week, actually. The coincidence sent a chill down my spine. Or perhaps it wasn't a coincidence at all. If he's your father, Hudson continued carefully, and if he was involved in whatever happened 30 years ago, then he's been living with the knowledge all this time, I finished. While I grieved, while our marriage fell apart, while I lost everything. Hudson's jaw tightened. Let's get the DNA test first, then we'll decide what to do with the truth. We walked together to the lab he'd mentioned, a discreet office in a medical building on the Upper East Side. The technician asked no questions, simply took our samples with professional efficiency. As we left, Hudson turned to me. Where can I reach you? I gave him my number, my hands shaking slightly as I typed it into his phone. 72 hours, he said. Whatever the results show, we'll face them together. Together. The word felt foreign. For 5 years, I'd faced everything alone. For 30 years, I'd carried my grief in isolation. The idea of having an ally, especially one who might be my son, felt both terrifying and comforting. I walked home through Central Park, my mind spinning with possibilities. By the time I reached my apartment, I'd convinced myself I was delusional. The test would show no relation. Hudson Wallace would politely disappear from my life. I'd return to work at the Windsor, serve him dinner if he stayed another night, and eventually this strange episode would fade into just another disappointment. But that night, I dreamed of a tiny baby with a crescent moon birthmark, and when I woke, I knew with absolute certainty that the test would prove what my heart already knew. My son was alive, and someone was going to have to answer for 30 years of lies. The 72 hours passed like 72 years. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except my phone, waiting for Hudson's call. Diana noticed my distraction when I finally returned to work. "Irene, are you sure you're okay? You've been off since that night with Mr. Wallace." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just a stomach bug." But I wasn't fine. I was standing on the edge of a revelation that would either shatter me completely or give me back something I thought I'd lost forever. The call came on the third day at exactly 2:47 p.m. "The results are in," Hudson said without preamble. "Can you come to my apartment? I'd rather discuss this in private." "I'll be there in 30 minutes. He'd rented a temporary residence on the Upper West Side, a sleek modern building with a doorman who clearly recognized wealth when he saw it. Hudson answered the door himself, still dressed in business attire, but his tie was loosened and his face showed the same sleepless strain I'd been wearing. "Come in." The apartment was minimally furnished but comfortable, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the park. On the coffee table sat an unopened envelope from the lab. We stood there for a moment, both of us staring at it. "Whatever's in there changes everything," Hudson said quietly. "I know." He picked up the envelope, broke the seal, and pulled out the documents. His eyes scanned the page, and I watched his face transform. Shock, disbelief, something that looked like grief. He handed me the paper without a word. Probability of maternal relationship, 99.9998%. My knees buckled. Hudson caught my arm, guiding me to the sofa. I read the words again and again, but they didn't change. "You're my mother," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're actually my mother." I couldn't speak. 30 years of grief, of believing my child was dead, of carrying that loss like a stone in my chest. It all came crashing down. I pressed my hands to my face and sobbed. Great heaving sobs that shook my entire body. Hudson sat beside me, not touching, just present. When I finally calmed enough to breathe, he spoke again. "There's more." After we did the DNA test, I went home and searched through my mother's things. Patricia left boxes of journals when she died. I'd never read them. It felt like an invasion of privacy. But last night I read every single one. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to a photograph of a handwritten page. This entry is dated April 14th, 1996. I took the phone with trembling hands. The baby became real today. Such a beautiful boy, perfect despite his early arrival. Robert is overjoyed, already planning fishing trips and baseball games. If only he knew the price of this miracle. Rebecca says the mother believes he didn't survive. A necessary deception for everyone's benefit. The child will have a better life with us than with a father who doesn't want him and a mother too traumatized to cope. I tell myself this is mercy, not theft. God forgive me if I'm wrong. The words blurred as fresh tears filled my eyes. She knew. Your mother knew I thought you were dead. Keep reading. There are years of entries about her guilt, about watching me grow while knowing another woman was grieving. And this, he scrolled to another entry. This is from 2010. Hudson is 14 today. Every year I think of his birth mother. Does she still visit the grave? Does she still grieve? Martin Cooper sends his annual contribution to my research fund, blood money to buy my silence. I've saved it all. Perhaps someday I can make amends, though I know that's impossible. "Martin," I whispered. Martin knew. Martin paid her. Hudson's expression was granite hard. According to the journals, it was his idea from the beginning. He approached Patricia when she was desperate for a child. He offered her a solution that would benefit everyone, except you. I stood up, pacing to the window, my mind racing through the implications. Martin, who I'd loved. Martin, who I'd blamed myself for not being able to comfort after we lost our son. Martin, who had grown distant and cold, eventually divorcing me and taking everything. He'd known the entire time. "We need to confront Rebecca Hayes," Hudson said. "She's still alive. I found her in an assisted living facility upstate. She has early-stage Alzheimer's, but according to the staff, she has lucid days." "When?" My voice sounded dead even to my own ears. "I've already arranged it. Tomorrow morning, if you're willing." "I'm willing." That night, I barely slept. When Hudson picked me up the next morning, I had dressed carefully. Not in my Windsor uniform, but in one of the few good outfits I'd kept from my previous life. A simple navy dress, pearls Martin had given me for our 10th anniversary, armor for battle. The drive to Pinewood Assisted Living took 2 hours. Hudson drove himself, and we barely spoke, both lost in our own thoughts about the confrontation ahead. Dr. Rebecca Hayes sat in the facility's sunroom, gazing out at gardens ablaze with late spring flowers. She'd aged dramatically from the competent physician I remembered, white-haired, thin, her hands trembling with a slight palsy. "Dr. Hayes," the attendant said gently, "your visitors are here." She turned, her faded eyes taking us in with vague curiosity. "Hello, do I know you?" Hudson took the lead. "My name is Hudson Wallace. This is Irene Cooper. We'd like to ask you about something that happened at University Medical Center in 1996. I worked there for many years," she said pleasantly. "So many babies, so many mothers. It all blurs together now." I moved closer, my heart pounding. "Dr. Hayes, do you remember me? I delivered a baby boy in April 1996. You told me he died." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, then quickly masked alarm. "I'm sorry for your loss, dear. It happens with premature infants." "Except he didn't die," I said, my voice low but steady. "He's sitting right here." Hudson pushed back his sleeve, revealing the birthmark. "I think you remember this, Dr. Hayes. I think you remember helping Dr. Patricia Wallace take me from my biological mother." The color drained from her face. Her hands trembled more violently. "Patricia, is she—" "She passed away last year," Hudson said. "But she left journals. Detailed journals." Rebecca closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, the vague pleasantness was gone, replaced by sharp clarity. "You have to understand," she said, her voice suddenly stronger. "It wasn't simple theft." "Then explain it to me," I challenged. "Explain why you told me my baby was dead when he wasn't." Rebecca's gaze shifted between us, calculating. Finally, she sighed. "Martin approached me first, weeks before your delivery. He knew the pregnancy was high risk. He said he was exploring options." Nausea rose in my throat. Options? He didn't want a child with potential disabilities. The earlier the birth, the higher the risk of complications. Her expression hardened. He asked what might happen if the child was born with significant problems. I explained the risks, but also that many premature infants develop normally with proper care. "And that's when he mentioned Patricia," Hudson said, his voice tight. Rebecca nodded. "He said Patricia had recently lost a pregnancy and was desperate for a child. He suggested an arrangement that would benefit everyone. His words, not mine. The baby would go to parents who wanted him. You," she looked at me, "would be spared the potential heartache of raising a disabled child, and I would receive compensation for my cooperation." "Compensation," I repeated, the word tasting like poison. "You sold my baby." "It wasn't like that." "What was it like then?" I demanded. "Tell me exactly what happened that night." Rebecca's composure cracked. Martin knew about a mistake I'd made years earlier. A mishandled case that could have ended my career. He made it clear that if I didn't cooperate, he would ensure I never practiced medicine again. "So you chose your career over my child," I said, ice in my voice. I chose what seemed like the best solution at the time, she countered weakly. The baby would go to parents who desperately wanted him. You were so young, so distraught. I was his mother. The words erupted from me. That was my choice to make, not yours, not Martin's. Hudson leaned forward. Tell us exactly what happened. Every detail. Rebecca's shoulders sagged. When you went into labor, I called Martin. He came to the hospital with Patricia. We'd already prepared the paperwork, falsified birth records claiming Patricia had delivered while traveling. After you gave birth, we sedated you heavily. The baby was healthy despite being premature, but we told you he had respiratory failure. What did I hold? I asked, my voice breaking. That night, when you brought me my dead baby. What was it? Rebecca couldn't meet my eyes. A stillborn from earlier that day. The parents had chosen not to see their child. We repurposed it. The room spun. I stood abruptly, needing distance, needing air. The casual cruelty of it, using another family's tragedy to perpetuate my own. Hudson continued the questioning, his voice hard. And the payments? Martin paid Patricia for her research. He gave me a cabin in the Adirondacks. We all got what we wanted. Her voice cracked. Except you, Irene. You got nothing but lies and grief. Did Patricia know about the coercion? Hudson asked. She knew something wasn't right, but she convinced herself it was for the best. Robert never knew the full truth. He believed the adoption was legitimate, if unorthodox. I turned back from the window. Did you ever think about telling me? In all these years? Rebecca met my gaze directly for the first time. Once, about a year after. I saw you at a fundraiser. You looked haunted. Martin was at your side watching everyone. I knew what he was capable of. I was afraid. Well, now the truth is out, Hudson said, standing, and someone will face consequences. Fear flashed across Rebecca's face. What are you going to do? We haven't decided yet, I said, finding strength in using we. But Martin will answer for what he's done. As we left her sitting in the sunroom, small and diminished, I felt no satisfaction. Only profound sadness for the years lost to all of us through one man's selfish decision. In the car, Hudson was silent for miles. Finally, he spoke. She confirmed what we suspected. Martin orchestrated everything. Yes, and now we know exactly what we're confronting him with. Hudson's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I've decided to move up my meeting with him, day after tomorrow. Will you come with me? I thought of Martin in his corner office. Successful and respected, living his life while I served drinks to people who used to be my peers, living his life while I grieved a child he'd stolen. Yes, I said. I'll be there. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. Hudson hired an attorney to review everything, the journals, Rebecca's confession, the DNA results. He also hired a private investigator who quickly uncovered a trail of suspicious payments from Martin to Patricia's research fund, irregular adoption paperwork, and falsified hospital records. We have enough to destroy him, Hudson said that evening as we reviewed the evidence, criminally and professionally. What do you want? I asked. From all this? He was quiet for a moment. I want him to face what he's done. I want justice. But more than that, he looked at me, and I saw vulnerability in his silver blue eyes. My eyes. I want to know my mother, my real mother, and I can't do that if I'm consumed by revenge. Then we'll seek justice, not revenge, I said firmly. We'll make him answer for what he did, but we won't let it poison what we're building. Building? He asked softly. A relationship, a connection. Whatever comes next for us. I reached across the table and touched his hand, the first time I'd initiated physical contact. I lost 30 years with you. I don't want to lose more to bitterness. Hudson turned his hand over, gripping mine. Thank you for giving me a choice in how we handle this. The morning of the confrontation, I dressed with care. Not as Irene the waitress, but as Irene the pianist. The woman I'd been before Martin broke me. I wore a tailored gray suit, pearl earrings, my hair styled professionally. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Hudson picked me up in a town car. As we drove toward Midtown, toward Martin's office, I felt oddly calm. The fear and grief had crystallized into something harder, clearer, purpose. "Are you ready?" Hudson asked as we pulled up to the gleaming tower that housed Cooper and Sterling. I looked at the building where Martin had built his empire on lies and stolen lives. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." We walked into the lobby together, mother and son united by blood and betrayal, about to demand the reckoning that was 30 years overdue. The reception area of Cooper and Sterling occupied the entire 42nd floor, all glass and chrome and expensive art. The receptionist, a polished young woman who couldn't have been more than 25, looked up with a practiced smile. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" "Hudson Wallace to see Martin Cooper," Hudson said smoothly. "He's expecting me." Her smile brightened. "Of course, Mr. Wallace. Mr. Cooper is looking forward to meeting you." Her gaze slid to me with mild curiosity. "And your companion?" "Miss Cooper is with me." The receptionist's fingers paused on her keyboard. "Cooper?" "It's not a common name," I said quietly. "But yes, I'm his ex-wife." Her professional mask slipped for just a moment before she recovered. "I'll let Mr. Cooper know you're here." We were led down a hallway lined with photographs of the firm's partners at charity events, courtroom victories, society functions. There was Martin, 20 years younger, standing beside me at a museum gala. I barely recognized the woman I'd been, elegant, confident, smiling beside the man who would destroy me. Martin's corner office was everything I remembered. Massive desk, leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He stood as we entered, his practiced smile freezing when he saw me. "Hudson, excellent to see you." He stopped, his eyes darting between us with growing wariness. "Irene, this is unexpected." "Is it really?" I asked, my voice steady. "Or did you always know this day might come?" Martin recovered quickly, the lawyer in him smoothing over his shock. "I'm afraid I don't follow. Hudson, perhaps we should reschedule if this is a bad time." "Sit down, Martin," Hudson said, his voice carrying an authority that made even Martin pause. "We have things to discuss." Martin sank slowly into his chair, his hands gripping the armrests. "If this is about the divorce settlement, Irene, that was finalized years ago." "This isn't about the divorce," I interrupted. "This is about what happened 30 years ago at University Medical Center on April 14th, 1996. All color drained from Martin's face. Hudson stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the desk. "We have Patricia Wallace's journals detailing your arrangement. We have Dr. Rebecca Hayes's confession. We have DNA results proving that I am the biological son of Irene and Martin Cooper. We have financial records showing your payments to Patricia's research fund. We have witness testimony from Melissa Grant, the nurse who was present that night." Martin stared at the folder but didn't touch it, as if it might burn him. "This is absurd," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Some kind of elaborate scam." "Look at him, Martin," I commanded, moving closer. "Look at his face. Look at his eyes. Are you really going to sit there and deny what's written in our features?" Hudson and I stood side by side. The resemblance was undeniable. The same unusual gray-blue eyes, the same shape of our hands, the same unconscious way we both stood with our weights slightly forward. Martin's gaze moved between us, and I saw the moment his denial crumbled. His shoulders sagged, his face aging 10 years in seconds. "This is a private matter," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever you think happened 30 years ago, we know exactly what happened." Hudson cut him off. "The question is, what happens now?" Something calculating entered Martin's expression, the look I remembered from our divorce negotiations when he was assessing risks and angles. "What do you want? Money? Some kind of settlement?" The casual way he offered compensation for 30 years of grief ignited a fury in me I hadn't known I possessed. "You think you can buy your way out of this?" I asked, my voice dangerous. "Pay us off like you paid Patricia and Rebecca? Be reasonable, Irene. Reasonable? I stepped closer to his desk. You stole my child. You made me believe he was dead. You let me grieve for 30 years while you knew the truth. You divorced me, took everything I had, and watched me rebuild my life from nothing, all while knowing what you'd done. Don't talk to me about reasonable. Hudson opened a second folder, spreading documents across Martin's desk. Your firm's history makes for interesting reading. Environmental regulations circumvented for clients. Evidence suppressed in class action lawsuits. Offshore accounts manipulating tax laws. Did you really think I'd consider hiring your firm without thorough due diligence? Martin's face hardened as he realized the full scope of our leverage. You're threatening me. We're offering you a choice, I corrected. A choice you never gave me regarding my son. Hudson leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. Option 1. We take everything we have, the fraud surrounding my birth and your firm's ethical violations, to the authorities and the media. Your career ends. Your reputation is destroyed. You face criminal charges. And option 2? Martin asked, his jaw tight. You provide a complete signed confession about what you did 30 years ago, I said. You acknowledge Hudson as your biological son. You resign from your firm effective immediately and transfer your ownership stake to a foundation that will provide legal services to families separated through deception or coercion. Martin stared at us in disbelief. You're asking me to give up everything I've built. You're getting off lightly, Hudson replied without sympathy. What you did was criminal. You should be in prison. This is extortion. This is consequence, I said firmly. Consequence for choices you made 30 years ago. Choices that devastated lives. For a long moment, the only sound was the muted traffic far below. Martin aged before my eyes, the weight of 3 decades of deception finally settling on his shoulders. I did what I thought was best, he said quietly. The pregnancy was unexpected. Our marriage was already strained. When the baby came early with potential complications, it seemed like an elegant solution. An elegant solution? I repeated, incredulous. You stole my child and made me believe he was dead. There was nothing elegant about it. It was monstrous. Patricia and Robert gave him opportunities we couldn't have, Martin argued weakly, gesturing toward Hudson. Look at what he's accomplished. Would that have been possible if he'd been raised by a struggling musician and a junior attorney? That wasn't your decision to make, I said, the simple truth of it cutting through his rationalizations. He was my son. Our son. And you took that choice from me. Hudson straightened, his voice cold and final. You have 48 hours to provide everything we've outlined. Our attorneys will review all documents. If everything is in order, this stays private. If you refuse, he let the implication hang. And if I refuse? Martin asked, a last desperate challenge. Then by this time next week, your name will be synonymous with one of the most heartless frauds in recent memory, I said simply. Your choice. We turned to leave. As I reached the door, Martin called out. Irene? I paused, but didn't turn around. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not for the arrangement itself, but for your pain. It was never meant to hurt you. The audacity of his qualified apology left me momentarily speechless. I turned back slowly. Your intent doesn't matter, Martin. Only your actions, and the lives you damaged with them. As the elevator doors closed on Martin's stricken face, I felt something shift inside me. Not satisfaction, not quite forgiveness, but a sense of completion. The truth was out. Justice would be served. Hudson stood beside me, our reflections ghost-like in the polished brass doors. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Yes, I said, surprised to find it true. For the first time in a very long time, I think I am. 48 hours later, a courier delivered a thick envelope to Hudson's apartment. Inside was everything we'd demanded. A notarized confession detailing the entire scheme, paperwork transferring Martin's ownership stake in the firm, his formal resignation, and a brief letter of apology. But there was something else. A second envelope, older, with yellowed edges. Inside was a handwritten letter in a woman's elegant script. To the birth mother of my son, if you are reading this, the truth has been revealed. I have lived with the knowledge of what we did for 30 years, and not a day has passed without thinking of you, the woman who was robbed of her child. I cannot ask for forgiveness. What we did was unforgivable, but I want you to know that Hudson was loved beyond measure. Every milestone he reached, every accomplishment, every moment of joy, they were tainted by the knowledge of your grief. I told myself we gave him a better life. Perhaps we did, in material ways, but no amount of privilege can compensate for the theft of a mother's love. Tell Hudson that his adoptive mother's final wish was for him to know his birth mother. Tell him that my deepest regret was not the life I couldn't give him, but the life I stole from you both. With profound remorse, Patricia Wallace. I read it twice, tears streaming down my face. Hudson sat beside me, his own eyes red. She knew, he said hoarsely. All those years she carried this guilt. She loved you, I replied. However it began, she loved you as her son. Can you forgive her? Hudson asked. After everything? I thought about it carefully. I don't know if I can forgive what she did, but I can acknowledge that she gave you love and a good life. The world isn't divided into heroes and villains. Sometimes people do terrible things and still love fiercely. Hudson nodded slowly, processing this. What about Martin? Martin made a calculated choice to solve a problem. Patricia made a desperate choice to fill a void. There's a difference. I touched his hand. I'll never forgive Martin. But Patricia, I can try to understand. Over the following weeks, as the Cooper Foundation took shape, Hudson and I began the delicate work of building a relationship. It wasn't traditional. How could it be? But it was real. We established a routine of weekly dinners, alternating between his apartment and mine. We filled in the gaps of 30 years, sharing stories, discovering similarities, learning each other's habits and preferences. I taught him advanced piano techniques. He taught me how to navigate modern technology. We discovered we both loved old movies, both hated seafood, both had the same habit of reading the ending of mystery novels first. Slowly, carefully, we became what we should have been all along, mother and son. 3 months after confronting Martin, Hudson surprised me with an invitation. There's something I'd like us to do together, he said over dinner, if you're willing. What is it? I'd like to visit the grave, the one at Riverside Cemetery. My heart clenched. I hadn't been there in years, not since the divorce left me too broken to continue. Yes, I said. I think that would be good. The small headstone sat beneath a sugar maple, its leaves turning gold in the autumn sun. Alexander Cooper, April 14th, 1996. Beloved son. A fiction. A placeholder for grief. A grave for a child who had never died. Hudson placed a white stone atop the marker, a Jewish tradition I'd taught him, though I'd never practiced it here before. This isn't my grave, he said quietly, but it's where your grief lived for 30 years. I'm not grieving anymore, I replied, the realization striking me with sudden clarity. For the first time in 30 years, I'm not carrying that weight. You're here. You're alive. The grief is over. We stood in silence, the wind rustling through the maple leaves. What happens to it now? Hudson asked. The grave? It stays, I decided. As a reminder, not of death, but of transformation, the place where one story ended and another began. As we walked back to the car, Hudson put his arm around my shoulders, the first time he'd done so. I leaned into him, my son finally returned. I have something to show you, he said as we drove back toward the city. He pulled up a website on his phone. The foundation is hosting its official launch next month. I'd like you to perform, to mark the occasion. The invitation took my breath away. Hudson, I haven't performed publicly in decades. I've heard you play during our dinners. You're still brilliant, Mom. Mom, The word, used naturally for the first time, made my eyes fill with tears. "It's not too late to reclaim what was taken from you," he continued. "The music, the recognition, the life you were meant to have. Let this be your new beginning, too." I looked at this remarkable young man, my son, returned against impossible odds, and felt something I hadn't felt in 30 years. Hope. "Yes," I said. "I'll perform." The foundation launch was held at the Riverside Arts Center, a beautiful historic venue with perfect acoustics. When I walked onto the stage in a midnight blue gown, a gift from Hudson, I felt like the woman I'd been before loss broke me, but stronger now, tempered by suffering and redemption. The piece I'd chosen was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the piece I'd been playing when contractions first struck 30 years ago. As my fingers moved across the keys, I played for the young pianist whose career had been interrupted. I played for the mother who had grieved. I played for the son who had been stolen and found. And yes, I even played for Patricia, whose desperate choice had shaped all our lives. When the final notes faded, the applause was thunderous. But the only face I sought in the crowd was Hudson's. He stood in the front row, tears streaming down his face, pride shining in his eyes. My eyes. That night back at my apartment, we sat together at my upright piano, playing a duet we'd been practicing. Our hands moved in sync, creating harmony from separate melodies. "I've been thinking," Hudson said as we finished, "about next steps for the foundation. There's a program in Europe I want us to explore, a model for family reunification." As he outlined his vision, I listened with growing wonder, not just at his ideas, but at the miracle of his presence. My son, alive and brilliant and kind, despite everything that had been done to both of us. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, covering the city in fresh white. Inside, in the warm circle of lamplight, we planned the future we'd been denied for so long. I'd lost 30 years, but I had the rest of our lives. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone take that from us. Hudson looked up from his notes, catching me watching him. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That some things once broken can be mended," I said. "Not perfectly, but stronger at the fractures." He reached across and took my hand, his thumb gently tracing the crescent moon birthmark on my wrist. "We found each other," he said simply. "Everything else we can figure out together." Together, the most beautiful word in the English language. My son had come home, and finally, so had I.